Welcome everyone to the next event in our Earth Science Women's Network event series, which is all about CV skills. We're really excited to have four really great panelists. Vani Naik from the University of Oxford in the UK, Claire Wasserman from Ladies Get Paid, Maryory, Sarria, Dulcey from the German Research Centre for Geosciences in Germany, Ruth Winden from the University of Leeds, also in the UK. And we're really excited to have everyone join us today. So a bit about what to expect from today's event. So we'll have a quick welcome for a few minutes, followed by an introduction from each of our panelists, a panel discussion and Q&A, which will be for around half an hour, a breakout room session where you'll be able to meet our panelists in a relaxed setting and be able to ask them some questions. So you'll be able to move between breakout rooms to do that. And then we'll close the event at the bottom of the next hour. If you have any questions or tech issues, please send them through to questions@ESWN in the chat. So a bit of housekeeping. So remember to abide by ESWN's code of conduct. When you registered, you should have signed this, but if you find yourself here without having signed this, please take a moment to go to our website and have a look at this. The link is in the chat for you as well. So all aspects of this event, except for the breakout sessions, are being recorded for those who can't join us live. And this event is fully closed captioned, and you can use the CC button at the bottom of your screen to show or hide these. You will be muted for the duration of the event. If you find that you can unmute yourself, please remember not to, so that we maintain a nice quiet environment for our speakers. And remember to share your thoughts in the chat as the event progresses. So we're all virtual, and it's always nice to hear what you're thinking. And if you have any tech issues, please send them through to questions@ESWN through the chat. So a bit about the Earth Science Women's Network, if you've not come across before. So we're a 501c3 nonprofit organisation dedicated to increasing diversity across the geosciences, with an emphasis on creating and supporting a nurturing community, working for cultural change to eliminate barriers to a diverse scientific workforce, and empowering scientists through professional development. And it's led by a board and associate board of directors who are all volunteers. So a bit about why we chose to host the event today. So this is an event that was requested in our member event survey a few years ago. So very much responding to what you wanted to hear about. We're aware that a lot of people are job hunting right now and may need support. Also promoting careers inside and outside academia. So this is a multi-sector event today. And we also hope to set you up for application success. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce today's speaker and panel. So Vani Naik from the University of Oxford in the UK, Claire Wasserman from Ladies Get Paid, Maryory Dulcey from the German Research Centre for Geosciences in Germany, and Ruth Winden from the University of Leeds in the UK. And now they're each going to introduce themselves. And first up is Vani.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming along. So yeah, my name is Vani and I'm at the University of Oxford, and I work here as a careers advisor for researchers. So that means I do one-to-ones, I look at a lot of CVs, I also give workshops on CV writing, cover letters and networking and so on. But I do also have another job as a researcher developer at Edinburgh Napier University, which I do on a Monday and a Tuesday, and that's effectively looking at the development of researchers broader than just careers. And I also do my own freelance consulting on a Wednesday. I kind of wanted to say that, it's good to show perspectives of having multiple different roles. And if that's something you're considering, happy to chat to you in the breakout room. But I definitely have had a squiggly career to get here. I started as an undergraduate degree in applied psychology, and after which I then actually worked in research outside academia, which I realize now is actually a really great experience. So first I worked for what was then called Defence Evaluation Research Agency. So doing research on large screen displays for the Air Force at the time. I then moved on to working at Unilever, and I was working in what's called consumer science, ended up somehow getting into psychoneuroendocrinology, and then I was like, okay, this is getting a little bit too much for me. And I wanted to leave research at that point because I found that the results took a bit too long. So I pivoted to teaching English to speakers of other languages. And that took me on my international work side. So I moved to Australia, to Turkey, and then I ended up in New Zealand for 8 years, well, which was definitely not part of the plan. I ended up doing my master's in applied linguistics there, and really enjoyed working there. I also ended up becoming a lecturer there for a brief period of time, but I eventually wanted to come back to the UK to do a PhD. And my PhD is on the lack of women professors in engineering. So I got a real theoretical understanding of working and understanding that academic career pathway to the professoriate. And that kind of led me to wanting to develop researchers in my professional role as well. So I have that kind of theoretical expertise from the PhD to understand what kind of career pathways there are. But now in my professional roles, supporting researchers both at Edinburgh Napier and in Oxford, understanding what kind of issues are affecting everyone as they're applying. So that's kind of me in a nutshell, a bit of a squiggly career, but all kind of leading to supporting researchers now in whatever career pathway they want to follow, whether that's within academia and outside academia. And obviously Raymond's kind of said that this is specifically a session that kind of embraces different pathways. So I think that's me, and I'll pass on next.
Yeah, good evening. I'm Ruth Winden, and I'm delighted to be here because I think our topic for tonight is so incredibly important, or maybe it's your lunchtime, depending on where you joined us. Because in my view, what I love about the CVs is it can be an absolute game changer in your career. And in my view, a CV can really open doors, and it can be actually, I would say, life-changing in many ways. So when you craft a strong CV, you write a compelling cover letter, you even add in a really strong LinkedIn profile, and then you apply for things. Recruiters, employers will immediately see, strong candidate. You get to interview, do a great interview, and then you're actually in a position to really negotiate a better offer. So in my experience, and I'll tell you a little bit about my background and careers, this has happened a lot with the researchers I work with. We put a lot of effort in at the beginning, and it really pays off. And some of the employers I work with, they're paid extra just to get our fantastic researchers because they presented themselves so incredibly well during the whole process. So how did I get into careers? Well, it's a long time ago. For 3 decades I've been in careers, and I actually fell into the careers field. So I'm originally from Germany. I was at the University of Cologne. I'm a social scientist by background. I also, studied at the University of Hanover, and then very late in my studies, I was told I really need to do a year abroad, and the only place to apply for was Cambridge. And I thought, oh my word, I have nothing to lose. Let's just go for it. And to my greatest surprise, yes, I got a scholarship for Cambridge, and that was the best year of my life. And I fell in love, as we so often do when we're abroad. And well, then I wanted to, stay in the UK. So I got a job. It wasn't the most brilliant job after I got my master's, but it was a job, and I really learned all about the British way of working and why cups of teas are so important, and all the jokes. I mean, it's a very unique working environment in the UK, and I'm really, really glad I didn't have a high pressure job. I had a lot of opportunity to just chill, get to know the culture, and really understand how do you work together in a British environment. And then but I wasn't very happy in my role. I was under challenged, and I bought a newspaper. This is how old I am. I bought a newspaper back then, and there was this job ad about a European project manager in careers. And I thought, that's really interesting. And I've always been interested in business and psychology. And I thought, oh, careers is just a good mix. And I applied, and after 2 days of severe grilling, I was offered the job. And I told them, I don't know anything about careers. I can do European project management, but careers, I really have no idea. And they said, don't you worry. And these days, I wouldn't say there's an interview, would I? But I was very naive when I started out. I told them what I wasn't able to do, and they said, we'll teach you, don't you worry. And so I joined this career consulting firm for 5 years, and then I decided to start my own business. I ran my own firm for 20 years as very international. So the most international I had a Brazilian who was working in Norway who wanted to go to Dubai. So this is sort of how international it got. And I work with individuals, mainly executives, but I always had that love for higher education and intelligent people, researchers. So I always split my consulting firm between industry, big organizations like the UN, which was very exciting and insightful, but also then working with higher education. I worked in Germany, lived there, worked in the Netherlands, lived there for 6 years in Amsterdam, and then, you know, also all those years in the UK. And after 20 years of running my own business, as much as I loved it, I just decided I needed a change, and I made a really drastic change. And I actually joined the University of Leeds because my absolute dream job came up. And I thought that's the kind of job I would be prepared to leave my business behind. So I closed down the business and became a research consultant, or careers with research consultant at the University of Leeds. I'm in a team of 12. We're really led by a fantastic inspirational leader. And I work with 1,500 postdocs. I used to work also with 3,500 PGRs, but now I'm being moved into more working with senior academics and professional services staff. And I think what's really interesting is I am very different to many colleagues in my field because I have so much industry experience, and, you know, I recruited for companies. I was part of assessment centers, so I very much bring the non-academic perspective. And so when I work with our researchers, I specialize in helping those researchers who decide academia is not for them anymore to move forward. And it's incredibly exciting and so rewarding, and I'm delighted to be here. And as you can imagine, all of us on the panel have seen many CVs in our lives and advised many people on writing fantastic CVs. And I think you'll be happy to see, you know, what we've got to share in this session. And I'll pass on to my next panel member.
Thank you, Ruth. Hello, everyone. Thank you to the Earth Science Women's Network for the invitation today. Well, I'm Maryory. I am a career counselor, coach, and educator. I'm currently working at the Career Center of the German Research Center for Geoscience, or GSZ. I came to Germany surprisingly 5 years ago. Yeah, I never expected to live here. And of course, I was needed to learn some of the German skills. Here, I support doctoral researchers and postdocs to build successful careers. We support them for career paths in academia, but also in non-academia. Because of the German system, most of the people actually goes outside academia after finalizing a PhD. So my main experience is working with people outside academia, or when they plan to go outside academia. So we have lots of CV checks and cover letter in our offering, but mainly our main offer is the one-on-one coaching sessions. We have like a coaching career process where we help them to tailor their application documents, but also we help them to gain some kind of like strengths and other kind of skills towards the process. I have a diverse academic background, so I am originally from Colombia, and there I studied first history, then I moved to biology, so I have a background in humanities, and then I moved to science. Then I did a master in social science in Spain, and then I finalized it doing a PhD in earth science in the University of Bristol in the UK. Well, as everyone here probably have said, and many of you can identify as well with this, my career path it hasn't been so linear. So in between, I worked for a long time as a teacher, like around 5 years as a teacher, and then I worked for a university in Colombia as a lecturer for 2 years. So that gives me a unique perspective on career development, and also I use these skills that I gained at the time that I was working to help also researchers when they want also feedback regarding to teaching statements or applications specialized in academic careers. I'm passionate about talking about self-awareness and career growth, and therefore I'm committed to empower others to recognize their unique strengths and contributions to the world. And this is something that I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed to talk about a very wide range of different topics from football until everything related to design or whatever other things. But of course, I'm really into, as I say, personal growth. This is really something that really passions me, and this is how I end up in this position. So when I look at for positions to start to work here in Germany, I saw the job ad, and really this is something that I thought that really could give me this particularly possibility to use my background in social science, but also to be applied for air scientists, where I spent most of my academic journey there. And therefore, yes, I thought that was a good match. So far, I've been very happy, and also I'm being very honored to share with many researchers their lives. They give me insights into their lives, and also feel very honored to help them to continue and navigate their career non-linear journeys in a more confidence and clarity way. So thank you for having me here, and I hope that you enjoyed this webinar today. And now I pass it to Claire.
Yay. Yay. Hi, everybody. Claire Wasserman here. I'm in LA, so 9:18 in the morning my time. Cheers. I love this about virtual. I know we're eager to get started, so I'll tell my story quickly. I am the founder and author of Ladies Get Paid. We are a newsletter, book, and coaching practice that helps women, well, get paid in all the ways that we can. So in other words, it's making sure that you are self-advocating and of course, negotiating for your salary. But a huge part of negotiating for your salary and getting the job is believing that you are worthy of that job. And that's, I think, been a bit of a theme we've heard through all the speakers here today, is that you really, you have to look sort of holistically at everything that you are doing and presenting. I find it's just fascinating, my work. So I also got a degree in financial psychology, because so often when we ask for more in our lives, the thing that holds us back is because we have a lot of feelings about our own worth. And it can get a little bit tricky when we are putting ourselves out there for a job. It's hard to separate your sense of self, your self-worth, from your net worth or what you do. So if you're feeling like having a lot of those feelings, a lot of those struggles, you are definitely in the right place. You're also certainly not alone. I have 50,000 people who are part of my newsletter. I also have a Slack group where they've exchanged over 4 million messages over the last 8 years. So it's been my own little petri dish or focus group where I've gotten this fascinating bird's eye view of not just what I think women kind of want out of work, but what they need out of work. And in that, I've been able to teach. I've been able to teach a series of workshops at places like NASA, Harvard Business School, you name the company, like Facebook, Microsoft, Amazon. I've done a lot of work with doctors and some scientists, but I'm not a specialist in academia. But I've worked with so many different kinds of industries. That's ultimately what we're talking about here with CV, is like, who are you on a piece of paper, which is a very intense thing to do. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to hopefully break it down step by step to show you how to get excited actually about telling your story in a concise and compelling way. And I would love to connect with you all after. So I'm sure we'll be including, we'll be dropping things in the chat and in the emails. And LinkedIn's probably the best place to come find me if you have questions after. So thanks again for having me.
Great. Thank you so much for such a great set of introductions. Definitely excited to learn more from all of you today. So up next, we have a panel discussion. So thank you to the audience for sending us your questions in the registration form. We had a lot of questions, but we found some common themes. And we've narrowed all of these down into some key questions within 4 separate key themes. And each of these leading questions will be pasted into the chat so that you can follow along with the discussion. And just a reminder that if you send us a question or your question in your registration form hasn't been answered, there will be an opportunity to ask more questions during the breakout sessions. And I'm going to hand over to Corinne to moderate our panel discussion today.
All right. So thank you, Rima. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. We have some question that we got from you, and we're going to have two panelists who will answer this question. And we're also going to allow the other panelists to add more information. So we're slipping down in. Our first theme is CV structure. And Claire and Maryory, you're going to be the first one who's going to answer this question. So the question is, how should each type of CV be structured? What should individual use as headers? Claire, would you like to take it first?
Sure. Yeah, this is very specific to whatever industry that you are applying to. So I'm hesitant to give, say it has to be this way or this way. But I will tell you the advice that I always give to everybody is this. Remember that the person looking at your resume is going to spend on average 7 seconds, okay? Which means, do you have the most important information at the top? And when we're in breakouts or maybe later on in this panel, we'll go into more detail about what is that important information. Part of that also means legibility, okay? So we don't want the font to be too small. We like bold headers. So no, we're not cramming things. We like to have good spacing. So if we're talking about first impressions and demonstrating credibility, when I look at your CV, I want to be like, this doesn't make me anxious. Okay. So I think regardless of where you're applying, that's pretty universal. Does this CV make me anxious because the font is so tiny and too crammed? And then if I look at it for 7 seconds, can I very quickly understand the value? A, the value this person is bringing, and B, are they a good fit for the job, which the job description is your blueprint for that. It's your cheat sheet. It gives you everything you need to know to put in your CV. That being said, go research exactly your industry. That information is out there. Don't stress too much. So I think that's something you may hear from the other panels is a lot of this, people get worried, overly worried about it. It's pretty straightforward. So I'll pass it on that note.
All right, thank you. Great advice, Maryory.
Yeah, I agree with Claire. Thank you, Claire, for those insights. Yeah, definitely. I do not advise as well to like a very structured way of setting out the CVs or very structured like format. I always think that the CV is part of also your personality, right? So it should be also highlighting this from you. And what is important for me, Claire already gave some hints about it. I like at the beginning, after you put your contact information on, for me, one of the main points or headers to highlight in your CV is the executive summary, also people call just summary, because this really gives you some kind of like an insight of like if this person is really fitted for the job. So regardless if you're applying for industry or academia, you're going to follow different kind of headers. Yeah, this part for me, it will need to be included in both. So that really in these 2 lines or 3 lines, you can explain why you are a good fit for the job and what is your motivation for applying to this position or for this job. And that will give you already a good position for the person who is reading you that just have 7 seconds or 1 minute, let's say like this, to go through the rest of your CV. It will immediately give you this kind of like impulse or like a good feeling that your CV should be read it. So now about the different kind of like headers, well, there are different kind of like CVs. It's easy just to Google it. And as I say, in the breakout rooms, you can go in more detail about it. But definitely talking about academic CVs, usually when you Google about it, people do not discuss too much after the main sessions, after going to the summary session and then the research interest and then the education. But what I like to always to highlight, because it's so important in academia, is to highlight what has been your funding or the grants that you have been earning in the last couple of years, because that gives you your work presentation or that you are capable to win money for the institution. And this is something that definitely people would like to know if you are applying for academic position. Nowadays, this is a must, that you know how to apply for funding and that you are able to win money for the institution. So this is what we...
I want to just add on to that really quick, just to clarify. So, at the top, we talked about executive summary. I would encourage you to also put the title of the job that you're applying to in it. A lot of people just say executive summary, but also write literally the job that you're applying to. And then when you make that introduction of yourself, then have some bullet points, because this will make it easier for them to read, of your highlights, the career highlights. So to your point of, if you've been able to get funding, a grant, research, it would again all be related to what you read in the job description. So picking your bullet points carefully off of that. But make sure it's not just a block of text. It's maybe a couple of sentences that then introduce maybe 4 key bullet points. Then you get into the work experience. But I always like to remind people, put the title of the job you're applying to at the top of that.
Okay, thank you. Vani, Ruth, would you like to add anything that was not mentioned?
I think for
Ruth,
me,
go ahead.
there's just one thing that's really important to me is when you write a CV and think about the structure, what is relevant. What I see a lot of my colleagues do wrong is that they almost hide the most important pieces at the end of page 2. And as Claire said, that top third of the CV, the first impression, if there's anything that's really highly relevant, do not put it at the bottom of page 2, because you want to give that first positive, strong impression and show people what is relevant. And that is always about, depending on the job, that is very different. So I want to, do not get into the habit of, see this happening too much, people sending off the same CV across the board, and we'll talk about that more on the panel. It always has to be targeted, and what is relevant to specific jobs, that's what you really need to go with. So don't hide anything at the bottom of page 2 that is highly relevant. Bring that to the first page. It's a marketing document. So, you marketing yourself, bring it to the top.
Yeah, I'm just going to add just a couple of things. One is sometimes people spend a lot of space on the education section, but if you have a PhD, you can just put your name PhD or name doctor, so that you can put your education on the second page and put more of your work experience if you've had more work experience, obviously depending on what career stage you are at. And then just going to the question in the chat about the order, again, depends on maybe where you're applying for the academic job. For example, in the UK, you can have research in your specific research areas. You can have teaching, talking about which, because a lot of academic roles are research and teaching, but you can also add administration service. And as Maryory always said about the grant funding, how much you've got, I'd also actually put in your, if you're applying for an academic job, I would put in the executive summary, successful with, I don't know, 300,000, whatever. I would put it in there if that's what you're kind of going for. So I would put personally for academic CV, it'd be research, teaching, administrative service, or research grants, something like that, putting that in the order of depending on the kind of job, because some academic jobs are research focused, some are teaching focused. So it does depend, as my colleagues have said, what the role is. As Claire said, do the research for the role, what exactly it is. And ideally, find someone who's been successful in that role, ask them for their CV to know what actually worked, because it does differ not even by field, but also by employer. You have the same employer, same field, university 1 might want it one this way, university 2 might have a preference for another way. So as Claire said, do as much research as you possibly can, but those are the clear structures depending on for an academic job, for example. But agree with everything that has been said about the importance of the summary at the top, making it, if you have 7 seconds for whole CV, 2 seconds to read that will give you an indication of whether you want to read more or not.
Right. Well, that was perfect. Now you know the importance of the structure. So we're going to move into our next team, and Claire and Vani, you're going to answer the question for the second team. It's about the content. What should be included in a CV? What should not be included? Claire, can you go first?
Sure. Yeah. So this is back when I mentioned that the job description's your cheat sheet, your blueprint. Let me go into more detail about what I mean by that. So find an ideal job description that you'd like to apply for, or maybe the job's already passed, and that's okay. That you'll create a master resume off of this. As you go through the resume, the job description, line by line, each stated responsibility, let me give you a bit of a talk about cheat sheet here. I use Claude.ai, okay, to do this. I put it through Claude and I say, find me the underlying pain point behind each key responsibility and what the business impact is. So I'm doing a serious deep dive, a serious dissection of this job description, because for every key responsibility that's in there, there is a reason that they put it, which means if you don't do that thing that they're asking you to do, it's a problem for the business. Okay? When I say business, I also mean nonprofit. Everything's a business. It just is. Otherwise, we wouldn't. There's money in and out of all of these organizations. Once you get the underlying pain point and the business impact, now you can say whatever I put in my resume needs to integrate those keywords. It needs to speak to the underlying problem and the business impact that it has, and also integrating keywords from the job description. So that's the first step, to at least directing you to see what is the framework that we should be following here. And then you ask yourself, what have I done, right? That can be transferable or that speaks to these underlying pain points and business impact. What are my strongest, as I call them, case studies that I can include? And it's a matter of picking. When I say strongest case studies, it's usually the ones that have, the biggest impact. So when you did it, what were the results from it, and why did it matter? And sometimes that means kind of going back in time and really almost writing it out like it was a movie. Before you get to the resume, just do a bunch of writing, remembering when you went through this project or initiative or this research, what was on the line for the organization? What were the challenges? How did you overcome it? What happened? Quantify the impact. And then you distill it down into 1 or 2 sentences, right? What I'm saying in all of this is it is a process. You're going to be doing rounds and rounds of editing. And the good news is that's where the magic happens. As somebody who wrote an entire book, your first draft is always your worst draft. In fact, every draft is always the worst draft because the next one can only get better. So hopefully you go into this with just just keep in mind, one draft, you're looking for one thing, analyzing the job description. Next draft, you're looking for your best case studies. Next draft, you're looking for the keywords and editing it down. So that's in a nutshell. Hopefully I gave you some good things to get started on.
Perfect. A lot of great things. Vani.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm going to be sharing a few other things. So I totally agree with everything that Claire said, and I think it's a really good mindset to say like it's an iterative process and you'll always be working on it. I think that's a really important, because sometimes people are like, I just want it done. It's never done. So I think that is something really useful. So one, I would say, we had a big discussion today actually at work about don't use responsible for, talk about your achievements, which is kind of what Claire was saying. Like, so what did you actually achieve? You can quantify it if it's possible. You might have, qualitative student data. You might have been nominated for an award. Like, what evidence do you have of your achievements? For example, if there's you and someone else, what's the difference in the same role? As I'm sure you've had colleagues before where, let's say, they weren't necessarily doing the things they should be doing, but technically are the same role. How were you different/better than that person? What did you achieve? Second is about your relevant experience. Now, this is I'm going to give an example. So I mentioned at my introduction that I worked in research outside academia. That was quite a while ago, and I still put it in my CV for this particular job. I was told advice, don't put it in, it's too long ago. I'm like, no, I'm putting it in. I don't care if it was long ago because it's still relevant to the job. So even if something was a while ago and you think it's relevant, add it. Something recent that's not so relevant, you can think about that. Sorry, Claire.
All right.
No, sorry, yeah. And then I just wanted to say one thing I just saw on the CV today, don't give equal weighting to all your jobs. The one that's the most recent should have more in it. Like some people just put the same weighting for every single job. It doesn't work quite like that. And you also don't need to list every single job. You can start bunching them if it was like, I don't know, like I now just put teaching from X year to Y year, and I don't list every institution because it's just not relevant to list every single place. So you can make a strategic decision based on how much space you have.
Okay. Ruth and Maryory, would you like to add anything? Okay, Maryory, can you go first?
Yeah, okay. Then for me, maybe to complement what Claire was saying about maybe use some kind of like AI tool or whatever other thing. Yes, it's exactly. I pay really lots of attention to the adjectives, because you will find out in the roles description that they use lots of adjectives. For instance, like excellent, or like desirable communication skills. So really pay attention to adjectives. So because this can give you some kind of idea of what should be really included or not. There is also another kind of adjectives that say like highly proficient. So if you have some kind of like idea and then they are re-requesting this, then means that you need really to include this in your achievements, as Vani just mentioned it. You really need to include that. And for things that are desirable, well, do not crack your head thinking how I'm going to do this, because exactly it's desirable. So if you have that and you can include it, well, great. If not, then it's something that maybe you can play around it. It's not really necessary. So I really put attention to the adjectives. And finally, what should not be included? For academic CVs, this is always a struggle, right? For people who's coming with academic CVs to go to industry, because they always struggle with publications and so on, should be included or not. Again, you need to translate your skills from academia to non-academia. So why shouldn't be included? Things that they are not relevant for the job position. So it's not that I am asking you to drop off all your publications if you really have a record of publications. This is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is think strategically how you can mention them that are relevant for the job. If you don't find that, for you there is nothing that really matches to the job, then you can just put a link. I'm not saying exactly to drop it completely, put a link that the people who is reading you can go and check it out if they need to, but you don't need to include it really in your CV.
Ruth.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about language in connection with the CV. So there's one thing about you need to make sure that you put the right keywords from a job description into the CV. And this might sound a little bit surprising, but Claire mentioned already the applicant tracking system. So many large organizations, they get so many CVs, they have software that is programmed, and they program the software with specific words from the job description. And then there's to screen people out. So you could be the best person in the world with the most amazing CV. If you don't have the right keywords from the job description in there, you might actually not get past that applicant tracking system. So for me, it's always, have we got the right keywords in the CV, just to make sure. And for instance, if it's project management, I always make sure it's project management, but also the abbreviation PM. So just to cover all the bases. And that might sound surprising, but this is how, copy paste it is in many ways. It's just the way that this software works. And then the other thing with language for me is you always have to think about the language you use where you're heading. So I work a lot with people in academia who want to go into industry, and we use certain terminology, and you can argue it's almost jargon in academia. So for instance, a lot of my colleagues supervise others. And supervision has a very clear, distinct meaning in academia, but it does not have the same meaning in industry. And so to really make an impact, you always have to challenge yourself. Is this the kind of language that they also use in the field I want to go into? If not, what does it mean? What do they say? So instead of supervision in industry, they might talk about coaching, mentoring, guiding, motivating, all these things. But so you're losing out if you don't find the right language. And I would always encourage you, yes, you can Google these things, but also, we all have networks, talk to people in the industry. Can you just have a look at my CV? Is there something that jars? Is that something that doesn't sit well with you? Does it speak the language? Because what we want to show, especially when we do a transition into a new field or new direction, we want to show we are one of you. We understand your language, we speak your language. And it's really interesting if we use some of the jargon in academia and go into different direction, it really doesn't make the same impact. So that would be my tip. Think about the language, explore with people in the field already where you're going, is that the kind of language, and make sure that you copy and include the same keywords from the job description. However, simple that sounds, that's what we have to do.
Right. Well, thank you for that detailed information from each one of our panelists. We're going to move into theme number 3, marketing skills. How should candidates market their skills? Are there any good words they should include? Maryory, can you answer that question first? And then Ruth, we're going to move into you. Maryory.
Yeah, it's very interesting because the question says how they can market their skills. And there is something that I always recommended for the elevator pitch. So really the elevator pitch is that your way that you can market in yourself. It's the way that you promote yourself. So this will be the first thing to utilize on our CV, right? And you can do it in a clever way. I have read many like clever ways to do so. So there is no a specific one, because as many people knows, an elevator pitch is something personal from you. So this is the way that you market or you promote yourself and your skills. So this will be the first one. Then also, if you are utilizing like using a CV that is based on skills, then you can mention your skills. And always is very powerful when you can use your skills and give some kind of like, again, some kind of adjective that gives you some kind of sense when you accompany the skill with some kind of adjective that gives me some sense how proficient are you to using that skill. So for instance, there's people who say excellent communication skills, other people who use it like innovative teaching. So it gives me some kind of like, again, some kind of like sense how good you are utilizing this skill. And this is what the recruiter wants to know. The recruiter wants to know how much or how proficient you are in that skill. And finally, something that I will be also recommended is always to use evidence. Use evidence to always to this is something that was mentioned before, but I just trying to tap again on it. And it's like once you mention your skill, always support it with evidence. This is what makes your skill stronger. You know, what have you do utilizing these skills? You know, like what kind of impact have you made with this skill, and so on. Use always active verbs, because it makes your CV stronger too. The words is like led, collaborated, and so on. So always start like this, so makes your CV stronger.
Thank you. Ruth.
I couldn't agree more. You know, for me, it's so important. Employers want to see how you use the skills in a context. I'm not a big fan of skills lists because it doesn't really mean anything in isolation. So there's certain storytelling techniques. I mean, we work a lot with challenge, action, result, you know, and you can do that in 1 or 2 bullet points. But, you know, think about how to use a skill in what context and what was the end result. And a very basic thing that so many people don't think about, you need to look at the job description and check which of the skills listed do I actually have, and bring those in. And then I would also recommend which skills are sought after at the moment. I'll give you an example. Everyone wants AI. Not everyone has AI. Even if it's not in the job description, I would be tempted, if you're an expert in AI and you've got strong AI skills, I would bring that in somewhere, because that might just give you sort of the extra edge, you know, that you know, over other candidates. And I would definitely recommend, can you just avoid cliches? And all of us who look at a lot of CVs see this all the time. Excellent working on my own and in a team. You know, that, I mean, I see that on every single CV. And what does it actually mean? You know, I'm good at working in a team. You know, you need to be really specific. Are you the person who's really good at coordinating? Are you the type of person who leads? Are you the type of person who, you know, brings out, you know, ideas in a team? You know, what is it about team working that you're so good at? Team working is so broad, you know, it just doesn't give people enough information about what an asset you are and what you bring. And so for me, it's really about, yes, acknowledging your skills, checking what skills are in the job description and how do you show that. And I mean, at the end, a CV is storytelling. So how can you tell short stories, you know, in a bullet point that includes the skill? That would be my advice.
Thank you. Claire, Vani, would you like to add anything?
No, I think everything's been said. That's fantastic. I think always just remember, and I'll give you the perspective of a business owner, and somebody who hires people and has let people go. I always want to hire somebody who is aware of how they fit in to the larger ecosystem. How does what you do impact someone else or another team? And why does that matter? That's something I've said before and has been repeated by other panelists. You're not doing things for the fun of it. You're not doing things in a silo. So being able to speak to, again, why does it matter? Why did this work matter? And a nice way to set that up is always, what was the challenge? What was at stake? And So we'll speak more at length at like how to really dig into why does it matter, and how to call that out. But that will make you stand out, because so many people just say, well, here's what I did. It's like anyone can also say that, by the way. Give me an example, bring it to life. It makes it real.
Yeah, I also just wanted to add what Ruth was saying about using the exact words from the job description. She talked about the applicant tracking system, but also when it's just, I went to a career fair recently and the employers were not using any of that. They were just still humans. So humans also do the same thing. So it's not just for computers. Like if you're looking for something and you're looking for a specific technical skill, use that word. I think especially from an academic background, there's a bit of a worry about plagiarizing using the same words. So sometimes people try to use synonyms. Don't. I know you might be tempted to, but actually use the exact same wording, because it's just it's almost like scanning for evidence, that you're looking for the exact keywords. So that would, I just want to kind of reiterate what Ruth was saying. It's for humans and for computers, so for everybody really. And I think the best tip in terms of like what to include, what not to include in the CV, is give the job description and the CV to someone who knows nothing about your industry, and just ask them to say, would you give me an interview? And what they're doing is exactly scanning. So you can give someone who has no interest or background in your area, and they should be able to tell by the matching of the words, for example. So in terms of synonyms, I would recommend just using the exact words from the job description. So if they say, I don't know, if they write, want to help me, Ruth, here, with what kind of things they might say that you might use a synonym for?
It could be something about facilitating conversation.
Yeah, exactly. So you want to say something, you want to use the word facilitate conversation rather than guide,
Lead.
Yeah. So it's literally about using the same words, because the CV is usually, 1 or 2 pages depending. So you don't need synonyms, just use exactly. Because one thing I also want to remind everyone is that the time when someone actually wrote that job description might have been months ago. They might not even remember what they put in the job description. Job descriptions are also sometimes cut and paste and just left in the organization's history. They may not have written it themselves. So make it easy for them. So you're thinking about this one job description, they're not thinking about it. So make it easy for them.
All right. Anyone of our speaker would like to add one last thing? Okay, wonderful. We're going to move to team number 4. CV top tips. What are your top tips for writing a CV? We're going to hear from Ruth and then from Vani. Ruth, go ahead.
Okay, so we've covered quite a lot of my top tips already, but I have one that I'm really, really keen on, and that is I love working with a little bit of color. So just a few lines, or maybe your name, and because it just lifts the CV up a little bit. And so what I do is I go onto the organization's website and I look at the logo, and I take the logo and put it into a website, something like colorpicker.com, and they will give you the hex code of that color of the logo, and then I use exactly the same hex code for the color I put onto the CV. So that is something my researchers love doing, because it just lifts it a little bit and it just shows that familiarity. And the other thing we do is that we use the same header style for the CV and the cover letter. And so it looks beautifully aligned, and it makes such a difference because it shows you have attention to detail. You really think hard about how things look, how are designed. So basically come up with a really nice header for the CV and then use exactly the same style for the cover letter. And it just looks so coordinated, so aligned, and it looks so professional. Because I do think that sometimes people are either going totally fancy with their CVs and cover letters, and sometimes they go too basic. So, making it stand out a little bit of color, maybe not too many colors, but, let's, one color. I mean, very corporate color would be, let's say, lots of companies have blue. Look at Zoom, that's blue. I would go out and look for exactly the hex code of the Zoom logo if I want to apply for a job at Zoom, and then bring that over. And it just makes a bit of a difference, and not many people do that. Because in many ways, you want to stand out, and you just show its attention to detail. It shows you really care, you really put some thought into it, and it can only be a good thing.
Interesting. Vani.
Great, thank you. My top tip is actually before the CV and before the cover letter. if you have an advert which says, if you have an informal queries, contact them. And the reason I say that, again, because job descriptions are written sometimes long ago, what you will get an opportunity to talk to someone who's going to be probably the hiring manager and find out what is it they're really looking for. Because, for example, they might have, as you know, in job descriptions, sometimes they're really, really, really long. What's the part that they're really looking for in this particular role? So my top tip is to try and, if you can, speak to the hiring manager, use those informal queries to find out what aspect of that job role they're really looking for. So, for example, I once saw an advert which said they wanted qualitative and quantitative research background. I contacted them. Turns out what they're really looking for was 99% quantitative, 1% qualitative. I'm a qualitative researcher, and I realized that was not the role for me. So part of it is making sure you're applying for the right job, which we haven't actually talked about here. So I think there's a lot of work to be done to make sure you're applying for the correct job, because then that's going to make it easier to think about what to put in, because it's going to be like, oh, yeah, but I've got that. So my top tip is the pre-work before actually applying. The second thing I will say is remember that you don't come along with a CV. I've had lots of one-to-one conversations, as I'm sure my colleagues have had, when the person will explain it means this. I'm like, that's great, but you don't come with a CV. Exactly like Claire what said, who are you on a piece of paper? So just remember that, unfortunately, you don't, at this point, don't come with an explanation with your CV about what this all really means. So it is incumbent on you to make that super clear. Based on the points we talked about, use the exact keywords. And the third one I will also say is be human. People want to work with people who are humans. So if there's something interesting about you, put it in. So for example, I was working with a researcher who is a vet part-time. And I was like, why did you put that in? Because then if you're discussing shortlisting, it's the vet we want to talk to. You become a human. Or for example, if you, again, with the career fair that I went to, where we had employers there, they said, you know, I want to see the sports stuff. Like I'm a sports person. I want to see that element. So it could be something, because if you have 5 or 6 CVs and you're discussing the shortlist, what are they going to call you? Like, it's not the person with the XYZ technical skills, because you all have that. What's going to make you human? People want to, at this point, still want to work with humans. So be somebody real and human. So if you have something, whatever it is about you, that's not necessarily connected to work, you can put it in there, especially if there are transferable skills from that particular aspect. So, you know, I still remember the vet, I still remember the diver. I don't necessarily remember all the other researchers I speak with, but the ones that have that something a little bit different, embrace it. That's all I will say.
Right, Maryory or Claire, would you like to add anything that was not mentioned?
I think just want to underscore what I said before about really using the job description and dissecting it with the underlying, for each responsibility, underlying problem and business impact. Based off of that, and again, you can use AI to help you, then reflect on what are the examples from my past that are the best supporting evidence for it, and then filter it through what all the other advice was about, you know, the action verbs, metrics, humanizing it, etc. But do that job description dissection before. It'll go a long way for you, I think, in helping you stand out and directing you to what are the best, case studies that then help you stand out.
Well, in my case, thank you, Claire, is to, I really like, and this is a tip I give everyone, is when people can link the LinkedIn profile and so on their CV. So, or some kind of like website or another kind of page that they maybe have. So that makes it, again, to stand up. So you need to think always that you don't know who is going to be reading your CV. That sometimes this person who will be reading you maybe is a visual person as me. So, and then this is why maybe playing with colors, as Ruth mentioned it, but also to try to tailor in a way that is nice at the first view. So, and this is very nice when people can immediately link all the things there in the contact information. And secondly, my other tip is really to have your name in a good font size, so that really stand up, you know, who you are. And then after your name, Claire suggested to put the role, or to mention the role that you're applying for. And in my case, I will be saying maybe to actually to think what you wanted to project. Think about a little bit of what is your personal brand, how you want it to be called. So think about it, and then after your name in a very good font, you can put after that 2 words that maybe represents you, and then this also will make you CV very unique. At the end, your CV is part of your presentation. So all of these things needs to be in place in order to have you in a good position for the job position. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I'll just note our participant here. There are some additional tips that are written by our panelists in the chat, so make sure you look into them. So I know you have a lot of more questions to ask. I want to take our panelists for their time, for the effort, for being here.